Welcome to the Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal webcast. My name is Lisa Johnson. I'm the conference manager for the Indie Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the questionnaire chat box. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victor Rocha, conference chairman of the Indian Gaming Association.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The New Normal, your go-to source for insightful discussions on the gaming industry and critical issues affecting Native American tribes across the United States. I'm Victor Rocha. My co-host is Jason Giles. Today, we're talking to James Siva, who's a little late right now, but he just texted me he's joining us. He's the chairman of the California Nations Indian Gaming Association, CNIGA, and we'll be talking, and there he is, just like a true pro. We'll be talking about California sports betting, which is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. And it looks like we'll be talking about it for a while. Jason, how you doing this morning? While James gets ready. Good morning, Jason. Are you ready?
Yeah. We're all, this is we've got NCAI annual conference next week, so we'll probably throw this into our sports betting topics at the IGA NCAI task force. And we'll probably throw in what Governor Stitt's done in the past 12 hours, just, saying he's going to legalize sports betting in Oklahoma. And at least these guys showed somewhat of a goofy plan. Governor Stitt hasn't even shown any plan yet. And members of his own party are already out there ripping his non-plan apart. So, but
you know what, the last week has been really fascinating because you have Florida, you have Oklahoma, and you have California, where before you had really no conversations. I mean, Florida, obviously. And so even Texas is kind of in play too, if you're talking about sports betting. And it's been fascinating to watch the Oklahoma tribes. They're being aggressive about Texas too. That's their backyard. So you'll see them. Right. They have these long relationships with the teams already. So those guys aren't dummy. James, welcome. How you doing, my brother?
Good. Sorry I was running late, jumping in between meetings, but I'm glad you invited me. I'm glad to be here. It's been, as you mentioned, an interesting few weeks. So
did you see the Matt Cradell article that came out this morning yet?
I did. Thought he summed up a lot of opinions of the initiatives very well.
Well, you know what? Before we assume everybody knows what's going on, let's talk about this. Okay, so for what we know, let me get my notes here so I don't sound like a complete dummy. So from what we know, on Friday, October 27th, there was two initiatives were going to be filed, right? Is with the California Secretary of State about legalizing California sports betting. Now, this kind of took everybody by surprise, but you know what? And actually, this doesn't really begin the story, because when we were all in Las Vegas, there was a story about a California sports betting bill. So when we first heard about it, what was your thought?
Yeah, so we heard about it the week before G2E, that there's a potential that there's going to be an initiative filed with some connection to a tribe. So we at CNIGA sent out an email to all of our members, because we knew a lot of tribal leaders are going to be at G2E in Vegas, and the last thing we wanted was for them to be caught off guard by either media or different vendors asking about this without having any prior knowledge to it. So we sent that out. Everyone was quite shocked, to be frank, considering the types of discussions we've had all year following up on the two propositions last year with Prop 26 and 27. And then, as we all seen in Vegas, nothing had materialized at that point. I think once word got out, I think they kind of maybe slowed down their efforts. But as we've seen, as you mentioned, on the 27th, they did choose to file two initiatives. We found the timing quite interesting. We had reached out to the tribes that we believed were connected and actually invited them to come and speak and give an update on, what their progress was, what their intentions were at the CNIGA meeting on the 26th. So they decided not to attend and then filed the very next day.
Well, you know what? That seems to be the modus operandi of this whole thing. I mean, if you stop and talk about it, the way things normally work is that if my tribe or another tribe were going to float this idea, they would talk to tribal leaders, they would talk to, they would present before CNIGA, which represents a majority of the gaming tribes in California. And that's the protocol. That's the proper way to do it. That's the way you get support. That's the way things have been done in California for, and that brings everybody along. Nobody's left behind. But this was a case of, it was just leaked out, where everybody was kind of like, oh, well, how did this happen? So when we were in Vegas, but what was interesting about it to me was that, it sparked a conversation, but I think a majority of us were thinking, just the timeline is just too short to get things done, to get signature gathering, but for us, of course, we're thinking very traditionally, I guess you could say, because you have to talk to the tribes to get it done. You know what I mean? So when we were in Vegas, we were kind of like, okay, well, this is a good idea. So it kind of opened up the conversation, where there wasn't a conversation, but then boom, we were surprised. Now I didn't put together the timing and all that, but that's kind of seems to be the modus operandi going forward, which is, we'll just do it and ask for permission later. So what's interesting about this bill is this is the language that the California Tribal Business Alliance used too. So this seems to be the vehicle that they were going through. Now, according to the article today of Matt, Paula decided not to go forward, and these guys went forward without asking the tribes. They filed. So we were all surprised a couple weeks ago. So what exactly is this? Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, real quick, James. For those of us not familiar with the California ballot initiative process, how many signatures are they going to need to get? What's the deadline on this thing? Because I saw your quotes in the articles that the clock is ticking.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got holidays coming up and everything else, potential government shutdown, which really impacts tribes. I'm with you. There's not a lot. I don't know what the deadline is though. So maybe just rehash some of that for us as well.
So the signature requirement changes election cycle to election cycle. For this upcoming election cycle, the signature requirement is going to be just south of 900,000 signatures. But you have to also include an additional 10 to 15% because some of those signatures are not going to be non-valid. So you have to include about 15% extra on top of that number. So they're looking at roughly 1.1 million signatures. They won't be able to start collecting signatures until early January, I believe January 1st. From the day of filing, they have, according to the process, 35 days to amend their language. And then the initiatives have to sit at the Secretary of State's office for 60 days before they can then be acted upon. So they won't be able to start collecting signatures until January 1, and they'll have about 4 to 6 months to gather that many signatures, which is going to be, frankly, we're going to require a Herculean effort to get there. The cost of signatures in California has skyrocketed the last few election cycles. As you mentioned, the government shutdown could affect this. Also, we're expecting to have an El Nino winter, which will make it that much more difficult to collect signatures in public settings. The timing of this, I think, is the thing that confuses me the most. Because we've been having conversations about sports betting all year, even after the results of the 2 propositions last November. I mean, CNIGA put together a special meeting to talk about sports betting going back to February. In fact, we did it in conjunction with the IGA conference in San Diego to make sure that we had as many tribes there as possible to be in the room to have the conversation. So we've never really stopped talking about sports betting. This has been on our radar. And if you talk about online, we've been talking about online gaming in California for 6 or 7 years, going back to the iPoker conversations. So this isn't new. So it's interesting to see their kind of narrative about, oh, we just wanted to start the conversation. Wanted to do this. Like, you just haven't been in the room for the conversation. The conversation's never stopped. But the timing of this, it puts tribes in a very, very difficult position about trying to make a decision in an incredibly short time frame, with a lot of moving pieces. And it's interesting that you look at it, they filed 2 separate initiatives. So there's an initiative that would essentially give tribes and tribes only exclusivity on sports betting, both brick and mortar and online. And it just says that it'd be a constitutional amendment. And then the second initiative actually lays out a framework for what it would look like. So we'll see if they're going to choose to move forward with both, with one, if they're actually going to meet with tribes and take amendments. I mean, I haven't heard or seen any tribe stand up publicly and say, we support this, we're behind this. I think they're kind of using their previous tribal affiliation as the means to gain support, but I haven't seen or heard from any tribe that's standing up saying, yeah, we like this, we're in support of this, let's get this going.
As a cousin of a chairman, we usually hear first. You know what I mean? we usually hear first. You know, that's like seems to be the other way through it and stuff like that. So I've heard nothing. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well, James, so then given the calendar, I mean, one could look at this cynically as just some type of public relations ploy, because, you know, that's the amount of money it's going to take. And what are they expecting tribes to pay that? Or are they going to pay it themselves? I mean,
Well, you know what?
did you see his quote in the article, Victor? This is all free. It's not going to cost
saw
you
it
a
all.
dime.
I see it
Yeah.
all.
Are you
Listen,
serious?
I called this thing.
I mean,
from
I know
the
this
beginning.
country can be a bunch of suckers, but I mean, all the way back to Barnum and Bailey, we've been here.
Wow.
You know,
No, well, look at this.
I mean,
is a good question. Who are the
this is
people
to someone who
behind?
talks like that. Yeah.
Who are the people behind these initiatives? And what we have, so there's a great article today, Matt Cradell. It just came out this morning, and we basically have 2 players that we know of. One of them is Casey Thompson, who is a poker guy. He's a poker player. He started All In Magazine. And then the other guy is Reeve Collins, who I was told is actually a good guy. But he's all involved in blockchain. He's involved with stable coins, created one called Tether. He's a serial entrepreneur. Now, these guys were in the beginning of Paula Interactive. You know, the Paula Interactive that we knew, which was Jim Ryan and that crew, those guys were in the very beginning process, and then they tapped out, got paid out. I have no idea what happened, but they were gone. So as Chairman Siva said, you know, they're using their past relationship with Paula to I guess give themselves some like legitimacy. I know some Indians. I guess that's how this conversation starts. So I know these Indians. So now we have these 2, and I don't want, you know, it's not pejorative, but tech bros. Okay. So now we have 2 tech bros. Okay. It's pejorative. So now we have two, and that's the whole thing. And if you read the article that just came out, they're basically saying, you know, how many times have we heard this? The gray market's taking all the money, the black market, we're going to shut them down. We are going to create the technology with you, the PAM, we're going to do it all. We're going to be able to block out the FanDuel and DraftKings and all the illegal people. But then you have another guy in here, which we have a new player today, who was from PokerStars. So the picture's starting to get a little more clear that we're dealing with a bunch of very ambitious tech bros that feel that, you know, they're just going to break the rules and ask for permission later, which sounds very familiar to most of us. So James, what is your opinion now that you have a little more information? They're saying we're not going to go forward if the tribes don't approve of it. Everything that we're doing, we're going to give to the tribe. You're getting it all free. You're going to be able to shut out the entire black market and own it for yourself. And we're just going to, you know, help you Indians. We're going to help you Indians do sports betting. What do you think of this, James? That's what he's saying.
I mean, that's been their proposal, right? They're going to come in, they're going to pay for everything. They're going to build this system and then just give it to tribes for free. And
they're going to teach us religion. They're going to teach us how to read and
yeah.
write. You know what I mean? So, So, you
It
know,
just it brings up all of those kind of narratives that we've had to deal with our entire history, you know, and I think the entire approach has been error from the very beginning, and I've spoken about this in the past. Like when you're trying to build a relationship with tribes, you have that first opportunity to either get it right or get it very wrong. If you come in the right way, respectfully, and you try to build that relationship and try to do it with integrity, tribes will honor that. And if you get in good with tribes, you'll be in good forever. Like we are all about loyalty and respect. But if you come in and you disrespect tribes, if you disrespect tribal leaders, if you come in with this kind of air of you know what's best for Indian country, you're done before you even get started. And I think that's the approach they've taken, that we know what's best for you little Indians, you know, like conjuring
this
up
is
all
the
the kind
path.
of
Come here, show me.
negative, derogatory statements that we've dealt with. Just us, our past ancestors, our elders have all had to deal with the same kind of derogatory, parental kind of views of how, you know, what tribes are and how they operate. And it's just all those kinds of feelings. So I think they've already failed before they started.
The Albert Schweitzer Institute called and they said these guys are legit. You know what I mean? So they're true humanitarians, that this is really about elevating the tribes and bringing it into the digital hunting grounds. sorry, that was wrong of me. I shouldn't say that, but you know, that's kind of what we're dealing with here, you know, which is a very paternalistic approach to this issue, a very serious issue by some unserious people. Now, what's interesting is they said they're going to pay for it all, you know, and initially at one point I was like, okay, well, if they come in with the $500 million, and if you look at Reeve Collins and what he's behind with NFTs and blockchain, it seems to be very successful, but it doesn't seem to be a very serious approach. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. It's very disrespectful. You know what I mean? And that paternalistic mentality is just kind of mind-blowing in the 21st century. And especially after we just had this, one of the most expensive campaigns in the history of California, you know, so, you know, it's just another approach, I guess, just to sports betting. So
And,
just,
Victor,
what do I think? Tell me what I think.
Look, they do have, there's a nugget of an idea here, which, you know, they're certainly doing more to take on illegal gambling than Kamala Harris ever did as Attorney General in California, or at least they're thinking about it. And they have, you know, somewhat of a plan based on how Poker Stars was cleansed and things of that nature. Although I don't think it's an exact analogy in this case. You know, you really would need some Department of Justice type people to come in, because I've just never heard of an entity that operates illegally. Let's say you're selling fentanyl and opioids. Hey, you know, healthcare company X is going to come in and take it over, wash it, and here you go, general public. It's all on the up and up now. You know, that's not the way our system of laws work. And, you know, California is one of the most heavily regulated states in America. I can sure as heck not you can't believe it's going to be that simple the way they're laying it out. So I guess, James, that you guys have been complaining, the tribes in California have been complaining about illegal gambling for decades there. And I know they want to move on it, but let's just say maybe they see it as slow moving. You said the conversation has never stopped, and it hasn't. Thanks for coming to our shows and keeping the dialogue going. Even at our midyear, it was still a topic of concern, and you were up on stage. So, I mean, what are the tribes? I mean, the clock's ticking for the tribes too, if they want to do anything on their own. Well, what is the discussion within CNIGA?
So we've been talking about sports betting. I mean, we never stopped talking about it, even after November when the two propositions ended up both failing. But we've really tried to take the approach that anything that the tribes are going to do is going to be based on actual information and data. So there's been polling data that's been happening from various tribes that have been, you know, frankly, on opposite sides of the conversation of whether brick and mortar is the first step, whether online and brick and mortar at the same time, so that when you get polling data, it's not being skewed in one direction or the other. And all of the data shows that the voter is just not ready. The California voter is just not ready for sports betting at this moment in time, regardless if it's tribally led, if it's commercially led, that they're just not going to be receptive at this moment in time. So knowing that, trying to base our decisions and our path forward on actual information, not just how we feel. I mean, tribes decided, we're going to wait an election cycle. We're going to let the sports betting kind of move out of the media, move out of the voters' mind, and then work our way back into it, in future cycles. And now this throws it right back into the voters' face. And a lot of voters are just tired of the conversation. Like Victor mentioned, it was the most expensive proposition fight in the history of California. There was media nonstop, commercials, billboards. Just the average Californian was overwhelmed. They didn't even know which one to vote for, which one not to vote for, which proposition actually did what. It was such confusion, and there still remains with the average voter. So right now is just not the time to get this done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. I listen, I like to sports bet in, in football season and everything. And I listen to these NFL fantasy podcasts and everything. And a number of these hosts are in California, and you'll just hear them throw out lines every once in a while. Like, I can't believe we still don't have gambling in California. And the average person who wants to sports betting in California they don't have a clue of the headwinds. And these are like, some of them are national sports personalities, analysts. I mean, I don't even think they know that their own constitution needs to be amended first. And then you get into the whole, lottery, card room, tribal gaming, dichotomy, horse tracks. So I'm with you. I mean, it's easy to understand how the public in California could be totally confused about all of this and just say no. And I guess you're facing a prospect of spending another couple hundred millions of dollars, and maybe only 60% will vote no this time, as opposed to close to 80%.
Yeah.
I mean, the numbers are staggering. But I think a part of it is that at least the people in California, which is that want a sports bet, which is not insignificant, probably dwarfs every other state, even though it's a small percentage of the people in California that actually want a sports bet. Until they start coalescing around understanding the hurdles here. And I guess it's going to take some work, not with just amongst the tribes themselves, but also those other entities, card rooms, lottery, and horse racing. Is there any discussion on those fronts? Or they just all want a piece of the pie and tribal exclusivity doesn't matter?
I mean, of course they would love a piece of the pie, but as far as tribes go, our position has been and will continue to be that any new form of Class 3 gaming that comes into the state, it starts and ends with tribes, period. That's it. So that's been our position, and we'll continue to defend that position, uphold the right of tribes to have the exclusive right to offer Class 3 games in California. And I mean, I don't see that position changing at all. There's been some efforts in the past to try to bring all of the different components of the gaming industry in California together. But, you bring up the card clubs, the racetracks. The racetracks are more of a minor issue. Their industry already has issues within it. So, but the card rooms, some of the biggest violators of, money laundering and FinCEN violations, and to partner with them coming from perhaps the most regulated industry in the country, which is tribal gaming, regulated on multiple levels. No California tribe has had any kind of regulatory violation in the last 5 years. It doesn't make sense for us to partner with them to bring in a new form of gaming. But I want to circle back to your point about the piece of their initiative that does talk about the illegal kind of gray market, black market. Is something that tribes could support, but because we will always be in favor of more regulation. Like, we don't balk at that. We believe that we operate gaming in the safest manner for Californians. Like, you walk into a tribal casino, you're going to be in a place that is incredibly safe, and all the games are going to be above board. There's going to be no kind of issues about regulatory compliance, anything like that. So increasing regulation in the state, absolutely, we're for that. but it's just, it goes back to the approach of essentially holding tribes' feet to the fire, as you're either going to get on board with this or we're just going to do it for you. Like, that's just never going to work. That's never going to work for us.
You know, James, so, you know, there are some interesting things in here, like you said, you know, the black market, the fact they'll pay for it all and give us everything, you know, so say it costs $300-400 million, they're willing to pay for it. That's not such a bad thing. You know what I mean? I think what we're talking about here is really the approach. Now,
Mhm.
I think what the big issue here, and I've been giving this a lot of thought, and I think is that this really does create a runway for 2026. I don't think anyone in their right mind is thinking 2024 is going to happen. I think the timeline, the fatigue, it's just and coming back in for online gaming and then coming back, it wouldn't make us look like morons. You know what I mean? To go to the California voter and say, now trust us. I think one thing that we've been very fortunate with the California voters has been our honesty and our being authentic, you know. So, but for 2026, what do you think this does?
Yeah, I think in some ways it lays the framework, but also in some ways I think it kind of already starts to muddy the water of, you know, who's going to push the issue. Is it going to be tribes? Is it going to be a non-tribal entity? I mean, this also has to send a shot across the bow for the commercial entities, you know, for the DraftKings and the FanDuels of the world, that if they maybe don't get something together, that they might get cut out of the market altogether.
Well, you
I
know,
think this puts everyone on high alert, you know, like.
well, you know what, we talked about Florida last week, and kind of what stuck through my mind all week was, you know, and I mentioned this, was that in Seminoles, they were audacious. They took a big bite and they got it. And this is kind of what this does too. This is to redefine what sports betting is. And in California is where the rubber meets the road for a profit for a lot of these companies. For the tribes to be audacious and do something like this, I mean, this is what we've been talking about, you know? So I think it really does. Well, first of all, I think your point's spot on. It really does muddy the water. You know what I mean? Like a presidential election that never ends. Like you know, this being inundated with this information, and so I don't think people are ready for it. You know what I mean? And I think you're absolutely right. I think, and what we've said all along is that if you're going to have sports betting in California, it has to be done in an incremental way, and you have to walk the California voters to it. You do retail and then you do online. This is not that strategy. This is a completely different strategy than we were talking. So for me, this makes this all dead in the water, no matter who pays for it, because you're going to make it even worse for sports betting down the road when it comes to the California voter, because you have to change the Constitution. You know what I mean? So these aren't the kind of guys that are looking at permission. I mean, Reeve Collin is into NFTs, you know what I mean? And so that fact that there's a market at all, you know, so I think to me, that tells me a lot about these guys and where their mind is and what they're thinking. And, you know, we're just a calculation on their whiteboard, you know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think it's a bad calculation.
Yeah, I think they're just looking at tribes as another variable in the problem that they're trying to solve. Like, I don't think they're coming in trying to value partnering with tribes, looking at, you know, the California market and how tribes have built it up over the last 30 years. They're not looking at any of that. I think you're absolutely right. I think they're just looking at how to solve this problem and how to get into California, and tribes are just a piece of the puzzle that they're looking at on their whiteboard.
Yeah, well, you know, Gene has some points in the Q&A thing. He talks about reserving license for tribal casino brands, which are good points. Revenue sharing with smaller tribes. But he said the worst point, no explanation of how Eagle One acquires the assets of all California unregulated online gaming sites. No transparency in the black box. Sounds like FTX. That's funny that he says this, because as you're doing the research into Reeve Collins, you find out this seems to be an issue with the guy, which is the black box, the NFTs, the promise of blockchain. And, that's why a lot of these guys are offshore. They're still chasing all these guys with for the FTX scandal and stuff like that. And so it seems to be the type of mentality that we're dealing here. The sad part about it is just the lack of respect for the tribes, for their journey, for all they've done. And for these guys, they just don't have any respect. Go ahead,
And
Jason.
James, I hope are you coming out to NCI next week in New Orleans?
Unfortunately, I won't make it.
Okay.
We recently had a death in the family, and so
Oh,
we'll be
sorry to hear that.
doings next week.
Okay.
So I unfortunately won't be able to attend.
Well, Victor will be there, so he can pick up some
I'm
of
sure
the
Victor can
power.
add some color to the conversation.
And I'm glad we made Victor come to this because because you're looking at what Governor Stitt announced yesterday, and it really is just an attempt to try to squeeze the tribes out of this. And Victor, to your point about their whole perspective on gaming, I mean, we saw it all. I finally got my copy out, the comments they sent from Idea Group in about the BIA land in the trust and the compacting process. And when you read it, I've read it several times now, their whole view of tribes and tribal gaming is just sort of a us versus them. They don't even appreciate why there is tribal gaming. And they always want to make this dichotomy throughout their comments and the way they look at things, that this is anti-competitive, that the tribes having exclusivity is anti-competitive. And, it really, beyond that, you just want to take them and say, you need to take a history 101 of tribal nations. Tribes were trying to just do their own thing on the reservations, and the states constantly came in after them and saying, no, you can't do that. You can't. I mean, the only anti-competitive people were the states trying to stop any kind of economic activity at all from occurring on the reservations. So, and then even IGRA itself, like, tribes were never in favor of that. We just won a Supreme Court ruling saying we're able to, take care of our own laws and regulations within our jurisdiction on the reservation. The Supreme Court said that. Final. Thank you very much. We'll go back to gambling and whatever other economic opportunities there are to generate income where at that time in the 70s, reservations, 50 to 80% unemployment rate across the country. So, it's just amazing. They're so myopic and maybe they're just younger. I wish they would have, it doesn't take that much to get a perspective on what's going on here. And especially for folks that are running around saying, yeah, we worked for Apollo, we worked for an Indian tribe. Well, you obviously didn't learn anything. Chief Smith, Robert Smith, tell them anything about the history of the Pala tribe? It's a nightmare. Being hunted down, bounties on their heads. I mean, from all the 49ers and, the people going after the gold, it's just unbelievable. So, all this has to be taken into perspective, but I'm telling you, nationally, there is something going on where these governors and people against tribal gaming interests feel like they can squeeze all of this by threatening to open it up to the commercial guys. And they're going to be right there looking for it. And like you said, I suppose you haven't heard anything yet, but you're right. The commercial guys can't look at this and be like, are we about to be cut out of California? Do we need to go get a ballot initiative moving to at least just, again, muddy the waters and get everybody to vote no? I mean, it's becoming like almost like a poker game and people staring across the table at each other. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And that's not how we've done policy in Indian country for sure, especially in California.
Yeah, I mean, because after November, several of the big operators did try to make, some amends to California tribes and do an outreach and say, you know what, we didn't understand the California market. We didn't understand the way that California tribes have developed the market. We didn't understand the political strengths of tribes. And so really trying to change their relationship with the tribes instead of trying to come in and say, we're going to dictate to the tribes what we want in the market. They understand now they have to work with the tribes, that tribes are the entry point. If you want to come into gaming in California, there's going to be a relationship with tribes. Very much back to the fights we have with the slot manufacturers, with IGT and things like that. Like, no, you'll have a relationship with us, but it's not going to be at the same level. It's not going to be operator to operator. It'll be as a vendor. It'll be as a service provider. And I mean, that's been the messaging that we've been sending to the big corporate guys like the DraftKings and FanDuel, that yes, if sports betting comes to California, there will be a relationship, but it won't be at operator to operator. It'll be, a very much a different relationship. Yeah. It's interesting, the point you made, Victor, about, or that they raised in the Q&A about, the revenue sharing to tribes and all of these things. They essentially took the Samuel initiative that didn't qualify and just took that framework and then made a few little changes and said, oh, look, this is a framework that got support of 70 plus tribes. I'm like, that's not your work. That was the work of those tribes to get that tribal support. You can't just co-opt it and say, oh, look, this is a framework that already had tribal support. Let's do this. But like, no, you have no connection to that. You didn't put in the time. You didn't meet with tribes. That was a long process that Samuel went through, and unfortunately, eventually didn't qualify because they ran out of time. To collect signatures. But again, it's that kind of parental attitude, like, oh, this is something that had tribal support. We're going to repackage it and offer it like it's a brand new concept. Like, no, this is a concept that we've looked at and seen before. You just dusted off a previously used framework, and didn't even, in fact, make correct changes. There's still a 10% to homelessness in California, which we've seen the California voter does not want to send more money to homelessness. The state already spends billions of dollars on homelessness. Another $50 million isn't going to move the needle on that issue. It's not going to change it. It's not going to affect it in a positive manner. It just, it doesn't have that kind of crossover appeal to the voter. Like, so they already missed the mark even on a borrowed framework.
Well, James, is one of the things, the new things that they added in here is that hub and spoke model, which is what the Seminoles did.
Yeah.
And, that to me is part of that audaciousness, which we were going to do anyhow. So they've just taken all the ideas and what we were going to do and just repackaged them and presented them in this savior complex that, they're working through publicly, which I'm glad that we can help them though, by the way. So I think in California, to get sports betting done, it has to be done in an incremental approach, but I think the end game will be that hub and spoke model, which does exactly what you just said, which, puts tribes at the forefront of these, and these guys become the technology providers that they are, instead of this, because let's be honest, this isn't about sports betting. This is about the future of interactive gambling in California, online gaming, mobile, whatever that entails. That's why we're slow walking it. We're going to get it done. The other thing that's really obvious to me, which should be obvious to everybody, is the relationship that time and that tribes have with time, and the relationship that those guys have with time. To them, they see a panic. And for us, we're like going, well, we got a couple of years, we can walk this in, and we understand that it's going to take long. The damage that FanDuel and DraftKings did, and BetMGM and Idea and these group, is really kind of funny because it's the opposite of what they wanted, which is they've really damaged the brand. They've damaged the relationships they have with the tribes in California. These guys come in thinking, well, we did this before, we're going to come and save the tribes. And then actually what they've done is just kind of made everybody upset. They didn't illuminate anything. They just look like, I don't want to say it here. I'll be nice. If you want to see my comments, you can go on Twitter. Go on Twitter. You can see what I think about this. I think for this one, I'll be a little measured, like I normally am, and stuff like that. So, Jason, where are we? There's so much.
I was going to ask James so when is CNIGA's next? You guys have monthly or quarterly meetings?
We meet bi-monthly. So we just met in October, as I mentioned, the day before the filing. I'm sure that was not a coincidence on their half. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 7th.
Okay.
They have reached out to me. So Casey has reached out to me through email a few times. And my advice to them is if you want this to have any chance, I was like, you have to find a way to get tribes in the room. and go through their proposal. Like, you can't just lay this out there and expect tribes to seek you out. Like, if you want to do this the right way, find a way to get tribes into the room.
Right.
But, even though we're doing some of the work for them here, like, I don't have the intention to do that work for them. If they want to find a day in a meeting, we'll send information out to the tribes, but it's not going to be, CNIGA is not going to hold a meeting for them to present to tribes. That's just not what we're not going to do.
I hope they wear buckskin. I hope they have the turquoise and the whole 9 yards. We've all seen this tune before. You know what I
Couple
mean?
sacks of flour and salt.
Oh,
Here you
I
go.
bring tobacco.
Tough
but,
winter coming up. Yeah.
It's a tough winter.
Gonna come with a pile of blankets for us.
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, anybody who just lived through the last, 24 months know that there is a fatigue. There is, in the sports betting in California is just not as popular as everybody thinks it is. But the ideas of blocking out the black market and hub and spoke and all this stuff is great. But your timeline and the way you did it has killed this thing for certainty, in my opinion, for 2024. So it's not going to get on the 2024 ballot. I just don't believe logistically there's any way to do it, to get all the tribes in the room and everybody to agree, because we know what it takes to get tribes to agree, get them in the room. And it takes kid gloves. It's a process. You have to walk it. It's respect. And right now, I don't think anybody's feel respected, because that was the funny thing. When this whole thing happened, we were all emailing each other and like going, do you know what happened? And, it was all pieces put together, and Paula was involved, the California Tribal Business Alliance, but then they weren't involved. And then, this thing drops to our surprise. And so the whole thing has just been very chaotic and without any real rhyme or reason, other than somebody feels it's time to rush sports betting again, So I think we have a question here. Scott Hill. I don't know who Scott Hill is. Yeah. You want to read that? Oh,
He's
Jesus.
got a patent that's going to solve this.
There you go.
So
thanks, Scott. Yeah. Read the room, buddy.
But well, James, let me ask you, one of the things that's surprising me when, Stitt came out and said this in Oklahoma, there are more than a few legislators in the state legislature there that immediately came out and just said, whatever Stitt's proposal is, it's going to violate our compacts with the tribes. And I thought that was a really good recognition by, at least a few members in his party that, this governor may be unhinged. But what are you hearing in Sacramento? Like, I mean, some of this could be cleaned up by the governor and his administration. Why can't they go clean up these illegal gambling sites and stuff within the state of California? If these guys know where they are and can buy them up and cleanse them, I feel like, Newsom's guys can. To me, James, you live there. You and Victor live there. California, I think at least the authorities always just kind of look at this as kind of a joke, right? Like, if people want to bet on a football game, what do we care? Like,
yeah.
I
mean, like you mentioned earlier, like every AG going back to when Jerry Brown was AG before he was governor for the second time, done nothing about that. Kamala Harris, nothing. Even up to now with Rob Bonta, that is not something that they've been concerned about. We bring issues about other forms of illegal gaming happening with the card rooms. It's been something the tribes have talked about for the last 20 years. No action taken. But when it comes to things like tribal compacts, they're always trying to pull more and more from the tribes, try to chip away at our sovereignty, chip away at tribal resources as much as they can. So while Governor Newsom has made, a lot of positive steps, and in some ways it's probably been the most respectful California governor we've had as far as his relationship with tribes, there's still a lot of improvement that they could do. He makes a lot of good speeches, but when it comes to actual policy and practice, he tends to fall short. He's nowhere near in the kind of realm of Governor Stitt at all. my heart goes out to the Oklahoma tribes, and I have quite a few friends out in Oklahoma. And that, I think, that is a whole other that's a whole other thing. I can't even wrap my head around some of the statements he makes on the regular. Yeah, I don't think they have that appetite to step in and do anything like that as far as regulating the non-tribal aspect of gaming in California. I don't think they have the appetite for it. And a lot of legislators to their a lot of legislators do have good relationships with tribes. So when it's a gaming issue, they will turn to the tribes and say, where should I be, or where are you guys on this? And before they form an opinion and come out in public, which, goes back to the work that tribes have done politically over the last, 2 decades. A lot of tribes have spent a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of time in Sacramento. I know Pechanga is one of them, Morongo is one of them, who you really have to go and teach tribal sovereignty 101 to these legislators so they understand what tribes are about, not just gaming, but what our sovereignty means. And so when there's issues that come up that affect tribes, if you can get a legislator to turn around and reach out to a tribal leader and ask, where are you guys at, before they come out with a statement, I think we're in a very, very good space. And fortunately, we've been able to do that work. And I think we'll continue to do that work to make sure that the relationship in Sacramento stays at that respect, at that level of respect.
Well, you know what, James? I think we've talked this issue. I think it's really important. I think, California sports betting isn't going away. I think what we're seeing here right now is just pretty much across the board. Everybody's been insulted. Every tribal leader I've talked to has said, no, it's not going to move. I think the fact that they bring another bill with an online gaming component after we just been through it is just, again, not having a real respect for the tribes and what they've just been through, or even the California voters. So, but I do believe this begins the conversation for 2026.
Yeah.
Whether these guys are involved or not, that's a whole other story. I can't see a scenario where everybody says, you know what, we forgive you. Although, listen, if they want to spend $500 million, you know what I mean, on our behalf, that's something I'm sure is a conversation a lot of people are willing to have. But I think as it stands today, I don't feel, at least to anyone that I've talked to, that there's any path for this thing to happen in 2024, so, but again, I want to really tell everyone, check out Matt Cradell's article in Play USA today about it. He did a really great job. He's talking to James there. I saw one question before we go from our good friend Chris Cerroti. He says, James, do you have any update on Senate Bill 549 that will allow tribes to seek legal clarity on table games offered by card rooms? Now, this has been an issue that's been going on, like you said, for a long time, which has been the legality of the games and the money, right?
Yeah. So tribes have asserted for a few decades that the card rooms are offering house banked games, which is a violation of the exclusivity that we got through Prop 5, Prop 1A. And the Senate Bill 549, also known as the Tribal Declaratory Relief Act, I always have problems with that word, was authored by the Viejas tribe out of San Diego, supported by CNIGA. The bill, unfortunately, ended up being held in the Rules Committee at the end of last session, but they're hopeful that it'll move in this next session. The bill essentially just seeks to give tribes standing to be able to take the issue to court, because the tribes have been refused standing by previous courts and previous lawsuits. So the bill doesn't pick sides. It just simply allows tribes to have their day in court. And our argument is, the card rooms have said for years, these games are legal. These games are legal. That they should welcome the day in court if they actually believe that. But they don't, because they know they're not. So they've been fighting this bill, but we're hopeful it's going to move this coming session starting in January.
So, Jason, shall we wrap this thing up? I mean, there's so much unanswered, but we're just kind of, I don't want to beat this dead horse into the ground.
We're going to be at New Orleans next week at the NCAI annual conference and convention. They have a big election for their new leadership. We're going to do the task force with NCAI. We've got a myriad of issues, not just gambling. That's why we did the task force. We can handle the gambling stuff, but there's environmental issues going on out there, voting rights issues, all kinds of stuff that are negatively impacting Indian country at this time. And one of them is just ignorance, frankly. And this is part of it. We've got people suing IGRA and the Indian Child Welfare Act, claiming they're race-based statutes. Just today we had a bill filed in Congress. They want to wipe out the small business loan program to minorities and all minorities, including our tribal entrepreneurs. And I mean, if you hate the federal government so much, I can point to a handful of programs that have been just instrumental in changing lives for the better. And those small business loans, which cost this country nothing, is huge for women of color and just underserved groups out there. But that's what's going on in this country right now, and that's why we have the task force, because we've got to distinguish ourselves from this broader argument going on out there that we have our sovereignty, we have our jurisdiction, and if the federal government wants to wipe their hands of all this, fine. The tribes would love that, right? We'll just take care of everything on the reservation. We'll work out agreements with the states and counties surrounding the tribes, but that's not good enough for them. They take stuff to the Supreme Court. They get rulings from Kavanaugh saying tribes have always been part of the state. Another guy, he might be a tech bro, Victor, with talk like that. He doesn't understand that tribes predated states. So,
the funniest part about the article that Matt Cradell is the last sentence in the line of the story, and it's from Casey Thompson. He says, if I have tribal support, I will spend what it takes to get it passed. This is Casey Thompson. They have my commitment that if I don't have tribal support, I won't move forward, and that it's also my commitment that this will be zero cost to them. He goes, if we're right with what we're saying, we're talking about a tribal coup of the online gaming world of epic proportions. And I've got to tell you, bro, we're going to do it. So that was the last quote. That was the last quote. I talked to Matt, and he said he had to take out bros out of the conversation so that would be lucid. And how dare you? Every bro in there is sacred. This is the way we communicate in California.
Right.
So with a quote like that, you know what I mean? I think that's a great way to end the show, bro. So James, thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate that. Thank you coming in and helping us put a little clarity on this situation. We still have a long ways to go, but this was another interesting detour that we'll be able to tell our grandkids, many, many years from now, and about the guys that came and saved us from ourselves and sports betting. So Jason,
if I could plug one thing before we go off.
Yes, please. Yes.
NCAA is coming up next week. For all my tribal leaders who are on this call, vote Mark Maccaro, next president of NCAI.
Uh-oh.
Mark Maccaro, my cousin, next week, and he's running for chairman of NCAI. So that's pretty exciting. So again, Chairman Siva, thank you so much. Siva, we appreciate all you bring. Jason, thank you very much. Again, we're going to be in New Orleans next week, so we won't be able to have this conversation, but the week after, listen, we're going to Oklahoma. We need to figure out what's going over there. We have a lot of friends, and we'll be talking about that. And thanks, everybody. Thank you, Chairman Siva. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Vic.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
See you guys in 2 weeks.
Thanks, James.
Bye.
Bye.